guys, today I'm going to be reviewing This Is Where the World Ends by Amy Zhang. This is the kind of book where you're best not to know too much about it before you go into reading it, so I'm not going to say too much about the plot or anything because I think if you know too much about the plot it's going to spoil it. I'm just going to talk more about what I liked about it, how I felt about it pretty much. This is a YA contemporary novel. It follows two characters. They're friends, but it's a secret that they're friends. And that's pretty much what it says on the back of the book, so that's all I'm going to say about the plot. What I can tell you is that I read this book in pretty much one sitting. I started the very beginning of it one morning or something before I went to work. When I got home from work that night, I started reading, intending to read a little bit before I went to bed, and I ended up finishing the whole thing because I just couldn't put it down. It was so good. I felt so much reading this book that I kind of felt like my heart exploded, and it just was really, really emotional for me. And I was it's kind of embarrassing to admit, but I was actually sobbing reading parts of this book. It wasn't even so much because of what happens in the plot. It was more about how the characters were expressing how they felt, and something really struck a chord with me and I couldn't take it, but it was amazing. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, so just saying that to begin with, I really, really loved this book. The book is completely filled with figurative language. There's literally a place in the book that they call the metaphor, and I'm not going to say what it is because that gets explained, but yeah, that's how prominent the figurative language is. Not even kidding. The funny thing is, normally I really don't like that kind of poetic language. It gets on my nerves, but it wasn't done in that soppy kind of way. It just captured how life feels, I think, and that was what was so brilliant about it. It was using figurative language to talk about life, not just to talk about romantic feelings or something along those lines. It's more about life as a whole and meaning and that kind of thing. Feelings of living is what this book captures. I can't really describe it, you just have to read it, but yeah. As I was reading the book, I would sit there and reread over some passages 10 times, not because I couldn't take in what they were saying, but because it was so beautiful that I wanted to absorb it. I wrote down a whole bunch of quotes from this book, and I feel like I'm probably at some point in my life going to end up getting a tattoo with some words from this book because there were just so many things that I was wow. The story is told in alternating points of view between Jane and Mika. Jane, her point of view tells the before, and then Micah's point of view is the after, and the whole book is you kind of trying to piece together what happened in between. It was a really, really unusual style of writing. It was something I hadn't read anything like that before. There were a lot of different forms of unreliable narration as well from both Micah and from Jane. They came from, for different reasons throughout the story. Sometimes they were intoxicated, sometimes it was memory loss, sometimes it was madness. There were all these reasons why the narration got kind of unreliable, and I really like that in a book. I think it makes it really interesting. The characters contrasted with each other quite extremely. They were very, very different from each other, which I really liked. I actually very strongly identified with different parts of both Jane and Micah. It just really spoke to me, I guess, and something just clicked with this book for me. Each of the characters had a really distinct voice as well. I think that a lot of people, when they read this, are going to really, really dislike one or the other of the characters. And I understand that. It's not one of those stories where you're going to love everybody in the book, but I think it's an honest and raw and passionate kind of representation of humanity and what we're like as people. Nobody's perfect. Everyone has flaws, and sometimes they're really extreme, and it's just I think it's an accurate representation of people, and it kind of, for me, it's looking at parts of myself that I don't really necessarily like and recognizing that in other people and seeing that reflected back. One other point that I want to make about the characters is everything with Janie is hyperbolized and exaggerated. Everything to her was beautiful and meaningful, but at the same time meaningless, and I don't know. I feel like if I talk about the specific themes that are dealt with in this book, it's going to be spoiling the entire thing. I should mention that this book needs a bunch of different trigger warnings. I'm not going to tell you what they are because that again kind of spoils some of the book. Some trigger warnings are applicable, so if you're a person who takes note of trigger warnings, or there's certain content that you don't want to be exposed to or you don't want to read, be aware that this book contains some difficult subjects, and if that's something that concerns you and you want to know what those trigger warnings are, feel free to message me or something if you want to, and I will let you know what trigger warnings I would give this book. I know that's kind of a really weird thing to do because most people are like, trigger warning for this, but I just honestly think that if I had have been told trigger warning for these things, I would have been expecting to come across those things in this book. I feel like it just would have spoiled the book more than anything. The last note I want to make about this is that Amy Zhang is an American writer, born in China, grew up in Wisconsin, and currently lives in New York State. But this book is, I think it was published in Australia and it's set in Australia, which is really interesting. So I'm not sure why that was. I haven't really looked into it. I don't know. I know Amy Zhang is very young, which is also very impressive. I think she's still a teenager, which is amazing. And maybe why she can write so passionately, but I just think it's interesting that she set her book in Australia. I'm not quite sure why that was, so if anyone knows that, feel free to let me know in the comments below because I would love to know why. Once again, totally recommend this book. It made me feel all kinds of feelings and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. If you've read it, I would love to know your thoughts. If you're going to read it, please let me know. I completely would love if at least one person said that they were going to read this because I really want to know if it affects anyone else the same way that it affected me. So thank you guys for watching this video. If you guys want to keep up with what I'm reading throughout the month or like day to day, you can follow me on Goodreads. I have that link down below as well as my Twitter and Instagram. Subscribe if you haven't already and I will see you guys with my next video soon. Bye.